Yeah, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Probably few of us have started to sit just because we wanted to sit. We are unlikely to have begun if we hadn't thought that there was something for us to gain from meditation. Although we haven't stopped doing it, even if we haven't yet gotten what we started out thinking we would. Everything takes time. Why we continue to sit may not be related to our having begun to understand the importance of dealing that what is disturbing in our minds. It may not have come to us yet that an important part of practice is coming to terms with negatively tainted thoughts. The second of the four bodhisattva vows, delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to put an end to them, clearly suggests the need for us to be determined to keep this vow. It would be a mistake, however, to believe that we can get rid of thoughts that we don't like, no matter how long we may have tried to do just that. As the vow implies, we won't actually succeed in ridding ourselves of delusions. The only way to resolve our problems with them is by accepting them. There is nothing wrong with delusions, actually, as they are merely another product or other products of our minds. But having to try to prevent them from showing up won't work. There goes Harvey. She's joined the list here. This doesn't mean that we must do whatever our delusions want us to. Suzuki Roshi's dictum that for this was to leave the door open to our thoughts when sitting, but also another door as well for them to go out of. While acceptance of our delusions, and so without holding on to them, helps us to deal with them in meditation, being unattached to them is less easily accomplished in ordinary life. That delusions are just thoughts and not things that particularly belong to us is easier to accept when we are sitting. The mind being busy the rest of the time that we are awake makes us more susceptible for disruptive thoughts, especially when daydreaming or when tired at the end of a day. Not mindful of what is in our mind moment after moment, we find that we have already accepted delusions that we hadn't recognized as being there. It is as if the door for thoughts to leave by hadn't been left open. Fortunately, in time, our practice starts to be reflected in the rest of our lives. As we become more aware of our thoughts and of the complicated influence that they can have on us. Another self-imposed barrier with respect to dealing with our delusions is the belief that they represent us when there isn't a permanent self for them to represent. If there were such a self, no one would ever pass away. We would all be eternal beings. There is also a more accurate way of expressing ourselves than by relying on I. For instance, a sentence that is closer to the truth that I am nervous is nervousness is here, as actually there is no I involved. It just is there. What defines who we are also isn't us, but what is facing us at any moment. In this case, nervousness. Likewise, when we say just sit or just eat, no I is necessary either. We don't think of ourselves when we are concentrating on doing something. In this instance, on sitting or eating. Suzuki Roshi said that I am doing zazen is self-centered thinking, as each part of our body is doing zazen independently. Accordingly, my legs hurt should instead be legs hurt. Moreover, something else that points to a decreasing reliance on I due to practice is Bodhidharma's not accepting his disciples' understanding of the Dharma until one day the latter said that he had been doing zazen so long that it was hard for him to say who he was anymore. However, while this I self, together with the delusions that support it, comes to matter less and less, this doesn't have a negative effect on the person who we actually are. Rather, this lack of interference of I in our lives frees us to be that person. Big Self, that we and all people and things share, is not being referred to here. But in all of us sharing it, everything is equal to everything else. Still, this person is an independent person, and so are you. Thank you. Bring in Jane here. It's her turn to move over a little bit. Let's see if we can get this done here. Here we go. I have to move too with Harvey on my lap. Here we go. Okay. So here's Harvey. Here's say Harvey. Oops, that was too much.
Harvey.
Keep going. Okay. Anyway, anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, Mark.
Could you elaborate on everything else? Everything is equal to everything else.
Good question. Everything is equal to everything else. Everything has Buddha nature. Of course, only humans have Buddha nature in a sense. Buddha nature is even because those are words. Buddha nature, or just our own nature. But everything that lives, and of course, actually everything that has died also, has Buddha nature. Not just us, it's everything. Because that is life. It's the life that is beyond our lives, but behind everything. That's what everything has, life. Everything is there. And the fact that we all share that means that ultimately we all are equal. There's no one better than another person. There's no one less than another person. And this extends to not only to everyone, which means humans, but to everything, both animate and inanimate, or sentient and insentient. So Dogen said the rocks and the grass and walls and a lot of other things are all part of that. And so we are all that. And that's the real issue. That's who we, as it were, really are. But that said, we all also are a part of this nature. And as being a part of this nature, each of us is independent also. But basically, we are all equal. Everything else is individual to us. Would anybody else like to comment on this? Jane, want to make a stab
I
at it?
was just thinking, in our kitchen, I have this wall hanging with all the pots and pans on them, and they're all different. Every one of them is different, and then kitchen utensils as well. All these things are hanging from there. And it's like saying that every pot and pan and utensil hanging up is all equal, even though their uses are all different. They're equally precious, equally necessary, and equally valued. And it's like saying anybody, anywhere, anything, anywhere, any object that you hold with love or anything else is equally valuable in the sense that it exists as the same. So, in that sense, everything would have equal value. And that means that when you look on people, you don't even, whatever their job is, whatever they do, whatever their karmic actions are, they are all equal. They possess the same value of being, and therefore, uh, we would treat them all with extreme respect.
Yes, Mark?
I think that's very nice, Jade, and what you said, Peter. Uh, with everything being equal in value, I think that's kind of a mental distinction. Is that what we're getting at? Our mental distinctions?
No, real distinctions.
Real distinctions. And so Buddha nature is something permeates the everywhere, right? Everything, everywhere, every being, every
Yeah.
action.
Yes, it's also called emptiness too.
Emptiness. Does Buddha nature change? Is it permanent?
No, it does not
Can
change.
you, can you guys talk to me about that? I'm going to listen to what you have to say about it.
It does not change. It's just present. Because it exists, it's present. And it's always present in one form or another.
So you're saying it has all different forms?
Yes, it can be any form.
Everything is Buddha nature, so it has all those forms. We are one of the forms of Buddha nature.
Yeah.
But yet there is no permanence. Everything changes. So
yes, on the surface, everything changes. Ultimately, nothing changes.
Because Buddha nature, although each of the things within Buddha nature, as it were, changes, Buddha nature in itself does not change in that way. But it's endlessly changing because all the forms within it are always changing.
Yeah.
But it itself does not actually. But at the same time, it is changing. So as seen from the nature of emptiness, it's not changing. If it's seen from the point of view of form, it's always changing. So we are always changing. But there's something beyond us that we can't come to understand. It makes our lives much more full, or I would want to say meaningful, but of course, meaning is an intellectual thing, not a state.
So we're kind of, I know I kind of pressed you all to divide the undefinable, but I think what we're getting at is that Buddha nature is pervasive and yet it's undefinable and perhaps understandable with our rational mind, correct?
Yes, but our rational mind means exactly rational. It doesn't say mind. It says rational. It's the rational, yes, for which that is true. Yeah,
The saying of Suzuki Roshi, the one that says, everyone is perfect just as they are, and yet we could all use a little improvement. That's expressing that ultimate nature which does not change and which is perfect as it is, and yet that surface being that we are, that is always changing, always making mistakes and always correcting itself and so on. That's like the two parts of us, two sides of us, I should say. The one side is the only real side, but the other, the relative changeable side is the growing and expressing side.
John?
I was reading an article this week talking about the differences between quantum physics and more classic relativity. And what it was discussing, though, is that in both instances, what both prove is that time doesn't exist. It's just a permutation, something that we as humans have come to somehow develop as a way to, just survive. And it seems to me that this delusion of time also creates this delusion of change, because without time, there can be no change whatsoever. It's just, there's only constant. And that constant that we're talking about is emptiness. And I think that's the kind of like the paradox that Mark has kind of touched on a bit, and that you have with regards to the essence of Buddhism, is that, there's constant change, and it's our inability to accept this change which creates suffering. So just a little bit, I don't know. I just feel like we exist in this constant. And I feel like that constant that we exist in, that emptiness, is constantly only changing because we have this delusion or illusion of change and time.
Well, we definitely, time time is just another form of measurement, and we have inches and et cetera, rather than meters. But we measure things by time. Harvey does not. I mean, she does a little bit. She doesn't have a clock in her, but she kind of knows when it's time to eat. Particularly when she sees us eating, then she decides eating is taking place. Should be taking place. But time is just is a human is of course very real. Yeah, I have a watch to prove it, as it were. But on the other hand, it's just a part of our human culture. Mike, I think, by the way,
Yeah,
it's not.
Mike.
No, I know.
What do you think of that?
My thought there was basically on I think. Yeah. Yes, Mike.
When I was listening to your talk, I remembered a metaphor that I've heard in Buddhism, and I'm probably using the wrong one, but the small self is like a wave in the ocean, which is the big self. We're a part of the same thing, but we're different. And because of how we exist and the realities that we are involved with, we use the small self to function in that, but we're part of the big self, which is everything. But we in order to function, we need what we call our I, our individual appearance and feelings and stuff in order to interact with everything. Is that kind of correct with what you were talking about? How, the big, small mind, small self, big self, they're part of the same thing, but we need the smaller part in order to function with the big part.
Well, anyway, particularly that the ocean metaphor or analogy is very accurate. Yeah, certainly. And but we say when we say we need it, we have to differentiate between what we need and what we don't really need. And what we don't really need is a concentration on the self. And because of that concentration on the self and belief in of course, at the end of my talk, I said the person is this person. I meant by, of course, me, Peter, not me, but Peter. Peter is Peter, and Mike is Mike, and John is John, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't And we need a way to refer to ourselves. Yes, I. But we have to be careful not to be attached to it because it's unrealistic. You're there always, but the I that you deal with, which I don't deal with, your I or anybody's I, has some difficulties when it gets attached to itself.
The wave changes as it flows toward the beach. The wave changes, and that's how I can't come up with an adjective or a verb to use right now, but we do have a identity, but that identity is only a tool. It's not reality. It's not, the screwdriver is not the screw that's being screwed in. It's just a tool to use to put the screw in place. Our use of our identity is convenient, and it helps to get along in the realities we live in, but it's all part of a bigger reality. So that we use this illusion of the small self to be a way of existing within the big self. But it's going to change because, like a wave, it's going to eventually get bigger, crash, dissipate, and then form again and stuff, or an eddy in a river or something. It exists, but it doesn't exist in a sense. You see it, but that's, I'm running out of words to discuss this with. So
I feel like going like this. John?
I have a question. So let's say there's a person who exists entirely within delusion, but that person is completely content, lives in joy, etc., and so on. First, is that possible? And second, if so, I mean, it's kind of the Matrix thing, right? Do you want to exist in this world of delusion and relative joyful happiness and contentedness, or do you want to take the pill and really open up the doors and see what it really all is? So is it okay to exist? Is it okay that people exist in delusion if they're happy and content? And is that possible?
Well, we got a lot of answers here, but I'll go first, and I'll let Jane go next. And anyway, no, I got lost. I got lost in my own talking here. Um, a narcissist, so-called narcissist, one definition would of course say. As a matter of fact, I've heard it's been said to me, I'm totally satisfied with my life. Everything is perfect, and that person believes it, and that's that's okay. It's not really my business, and I'm not going to say that. I mean, but I kind of doubt it. It's just it's just wearing perfume as it were, over one's life. But it's okay. It's not. If you're happy, please be happy. Don't lose your happiness. But I need it. Yes, Sandy. Oh, yes, Sandy. Wasn't saying next. I don't know. Oh, Jane was next. Jane was
No,
done.
it's okay.
Right.
Sandy.
Oh, Jane, you didn't have it.
No, go ahead.
I
Go ahead,
Oh.
Sandy.
Okay. First of all, to what you said, Peter, my mother lived in a delusion. She lived in a delusion in that she truly, honestly, with all her heart, believed that when she died, she was going to go see all of her beloved pets, and her daughter, or people who were no longer there, and that it was going to be a good, wonderful thing. And that kept her going because, living in the life of of delusion, it was a painful life for her. But that little thing was enough that kept her dealing with the delusion and keeping it in her life and never trying to change in any way. And John, when you said about this article that you read, or a book, that time doesn't exist. Well, I read a book by, I think his name is Ravelli. He's an Italian physicist, and his study is time. And it is true that time passes faster at sea level than it does on the top of a mountain. So there you have two separate views: the passage of time and how it works, and the non-existence of time. So, it's like, who's right? I mean, we do have, in a sense, we have time. We've created the ability to measure it, but for me, I don't think time is a total delusion. I think that time might not pass in a linear way, that's something we have developed as a delusion to work with time. Time can also feel like the past and the present and now is all together as one. So, which is a delusion, what's true? It's kind of hard to differentiate, when you're living a life that has to have time to make sense. And otherwise you'd never get up for work in the morning, or never go to bed at night because you were having too much fun. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but it's true about delusion. I remember when I first started sitting, I started getting the feeling of what was going through my mind. And what was going through my mind was, most of it was pure garbage. And I looked at it, and it didn't have much meaning to me, because it really wasn't relating to what was there. I was sitting. Where were these thoughts coming from? That I had to go pick up my pharmacy thing, or I wanted to get this book, or, these stupid little thoughts would come in all the time during my sitting when I first started sitting. And as time went on, I became a little more adept at seeing these delusions while I was not sitting, while I was in my everyday life. And it surprised me how much was total delusion and how much was actually thought that was worth something, a thought that I used to do something that I needed to do. So, it's like we live in this fishbowl of delusion, and it takes a while till you can actually start seeing you're swimming in a circle constantly because you're in a big bowl.
No, thank you, Sid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark? Oh, take your hand down. I never know when you're. Yeah.
Hi, I'll get rid of mine right now so I can know. You can know when I'm stopped. Okay, so I'm sorry, I hit another button here. So that was very interesting what you had to say, Sandy. I went and looked up this philosopher, this scientist, physicist, Ravelli, and he claims that time is affected and moves, it's ununiform, and it is like more like heat or something. So it's an energy or something like that. But I think in our own personal time, we vary everything a lot without measurement. And I think you're right. It seems like time is probably the ultimate delusion in many ways, besides our own mixed up minds, which I would say probably rank number one, if you had to rank. But that would be rather discriminative, wouldn't it? I think the nowness is where everything resides, and we fall out of it because we can only maintain so much nowness without slipping off the the mark, as it were. So that's my 2 cents right there. I was going to comment on a lot of other things, but the conversation's taken a lot of turns.
Yeah, it's turned. Yes, it has.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Mark. I think that was all very good, except I don't know that we cannot take too much moments as correct. It's hard for us to do that. Quite true, but I don't know if that's the reason why.
Well, my theory is just kind of my own imagination coming up with this. I don't know if it really is anything, because all these thoughts are so, movable and adjustable. But I kind of feel like when we do experience now, and often when we do experience, let's say, enlightenment, it's like our sense of time is over. It's like our sense of time, the now, it takes over. There's, I guess, your perception of it is that there is no time in that nowness. But as soon as you get a thought, like you've always maintained, Peter, suddenly it's in the past. Suddenly it's used to be nowness. Now we're back on thinking time, which thinking time is
That's good.
time, right? It's time.
Thinking time is good. Yeah, I mean, thinking time is accurate. Yes, what you're saying. Yeah. Rachel.
So,
Oh yes, Mark. Mark.
I was going to say, so I guess in a way, expanding our sense of time is really crucial to letting thoughts go.
Wait, that's a whole nother can of worms there. I think.
Well, it's the same thing, really. When you can stop thinking, when you can let the thoughts disappear, then time stops.
Yes, it does.
And the nowness is there.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
I'll just leave it at that.
Jane, we got cut off here.
No,
Jane.
that's okay.
Okay.
Rachel.
Rachel. She's over there. Yeah.
Language. You can't have language that's utterly based on concepts. Language such as humans use it, to use words like Dharma and Buddha nature and explain the nature of time, is that really just equivalent to the way Harvey will meow for food?
Yeah. And she says, it's time. I agree. Yeah. Thank you. Mark? Mike. All the M's.
I'm going to repeat myself for the millionth time. I really believe that time is a concept we created because all there is now. No matter where you are, what you're doing, if you're waking up in the morning, going to bed at night, whatever, all there is now. We created time as a convenience to record and possibly predict things. And that, as Mark was saying with now and the stuff, I've always felt that that's all there is now. So time is not really something that I think exists outside of our own concepts. It is just how we break up what we call time into measurable amounts, but it's just our concept. Time doesn't exist outside of our minds, I don't believe. And so all you got is now, no matter what you're doing, whether you're waking up, walking down the street tomorrow, 3 weeks ago, at that point, it was now, and that's all there is. And so I do believe time is not something outside of us. It's something we've created.
Yeah, one time when Jane and I lived in Japan, we had close friends that were a family from the Congo, and we invited them for lunch one day at 2:00, and they showed up at 4:30, and so we were rather surprised. But they even said that they'd gone to the local department store and gone shopping, and so that was that definitely offended my sense of time. But actually, it turned out that Africans or the Zairians, they were from Zaire, Congolese, um, uh, don't, you know, only have divisions like morning, noon, afternoon. So when you say you invite somebody, you don't invite them for 2 o'clock. You invite them for you know, morning, mid morning, noon, something. I don't know what the divisions are, and so their sense of time is very very different. But I was not, I wasn't angry, but I was, you know, I was thought it was rather strange of them to go shopping. But they were totally, it was obviously they were operating on a different way of thinking about time. So time is really relative. I think uh, I think is also true for Tibetans because the way that the Rinpoche Trungpa acted about time was very unique. A lecture would be at 8, and he'd show up at 10 in the evening. Literally, that's what happens, and it was just very natural for him to do that. I think, Jane, you want to say something, Jane,
No,
about something?
no, thanks. Sandy.
Sandy?
Well, Mike had said that he believes that there's only just this big now, that there's no other time. If that's the case, I mean, then we wouldn't be able to exist, would we? Emptiness, we change through emptiness. We age, you know, other things age. Nothing is permanent. I don't. That can't happen in just a static place where there has to be some sort of ability to allow for that change. And it seems to me only time would allow for that change. So there really is time. I mean, they say our universe, you know, it was created and it took so much time to create it. How would we have this thing? How would we have 9 months of pregnancy if we don't have time? If
Yeah,
it's just now.
Yeah,
Well, Sandy, it would be
Yeah.
the same thing. You know, if you don't have a name attached to you, would you still exist?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yes.
just go about suppose you forgot your name for a week and you didn't have any idea who you were, your history, anything that connected you to who you were. You'd still just go about doing business and probably just continuing the same way you usually behave. So if a woman is pregnant, whether it's said to be 9 months or not, it would just unfold as it unfolds
Yeah.
until it's ready to be born, whether you have something called time or not.
Well, yeah, time is just a word.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a concept. It's
It's a
just
concept.
discovery.
But it seems like, you know, nothing is, when we talk of emptiness, nothing is permanent. Everything changes, except
yeah,
say for
let me answer. Let me answer. Yes, Sandy. You know, it's Buddhism is kind of unique as a way of thinking because it always looks at both sides. So when we get in a discussion, we have a way of thinking that says, well, you have one chance, right or wrong. But in Buddhism, both are right. So of course, all those things you're saying are 100% true. But there's another side to reality. And Buddhism allows us to reveal that other side of reality. It ultimately does not deny that other side. And as a matter of fact, when you do get full circle, as it were, that other side is fully there. That was kind of alluding to it in my talk today when I said a person is a person, and time is time. So therefore, when you know things exist, things don't exist. Therefore, things exist is Buddhism, and that doesn't. And so both of them are equally true. So we don't have to fight about which is right because both are right. There is time and there isn't time.
Hmm.
Both are true. Yeah, Mark. Oh, James.
That's okay.
Oh, can I say something?
No, let's have Mark do something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, no, you can talk if you
Oh,
want to ask. Go
um,
ahead.
what you said, Jane, about say I forgot my name for a week. that in itself would cause chaos. It would cause change in my life.
But it wouldn't make any difference whether you had a name or not in that sense. You'd still continue
Yeah.
to live and to act.
Right.
Whether it changed
And
or not, you would still continue to exist as a being, as yourself actually.
You'd sleep, you'd eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So in that sense, you could say that you would be the expression of time just by your own changes. Your change itself would be that, would express it. So whether we say it's time that changes you or you change naturally because that's your nature to change, and so we call it time, it's either one. You would still change because that's the nature of us, is that we change. But you have this other unchanging part of yourself as well.
Mark?
Oh, okay. Well, when I first read Suzuki Roshi's Beginner's Mind, Zen Mind, I people ask me what's it about, and I go, well, it's about a lot of paradoxes because everything is really a paradox, just about. And the way he talked about, and I think all in general Buddhism looks at is that it's just like we can't know. We just can't know. We have these limits of our own intelligence and ability to understand what there is if we look through the rational mind. Our mind, as you said, our rationality, but just trying to make sense of it all. I think we can only really do it with metaphors, if anything. And time, we use time and metaphors all the time, because I just went back to the past to remember what I experienced with Suzuki's book. So I bring it into what was the future back then, which is now. So I'm just wagering that time is very confusing unless you have a clock.
Right, exactly.
Not
Yeah.
for Harvey.
Yeah.
Not for Harvey.
Right. No clock, no worry.
Don't worry. She always shows up at lunchtime.
Right. But that's probably because he knows where the sun is, and he knows where all the shadows are, and the whole thing makes sense to him. And his organic rhythms, circadian rhythms, fit into that. So that's true. We do have circadian rhythms within us, but we have made it very intellectual, where we can divide time into millionths of a second. In fact, don't you have an atomic clock sitting on your wall?
Yeah.
Which keeps time to a pulse and a crystal that is like a universal type that every scientific organization is part of?
Well,
But we do have an atomic.
we have down the clock, and that means that it's
Always accurate.
always accurate, and it's also based on a satellite too. So, whatever.
So you've really gone down the rabbit hole with time.
If we're gonna have it better be exact.
Time's on my side.
Oh, I just want to say one thing about when we're talking about who has her. Oh, Rachel.
I'm still on Greenwich time, but I was thinking, especially since we're all gathered here, that there is such a difference, also with delusion, living with essential paradox, but being distraught, unsettled, and disruptive about it. And that it is possible to live with a sense of trust, even safety, in the inherent paradox of just what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean? That there is a paradox and a central paradox to lots of things, even if you don't want to argue about time. But that being here today and just being together in this context, to me, is affirmation that it's possible to live with a degree of contentment, joyful, even though it's in the midst of a peculiar paradox that doesn't seem to be able to be solved readily. And I'm glad you're here. Everyone is here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Jane, you want to say?
I don't know. Maybe it's not necessary.
Okay. All right. All right, everybody.